Hotep family, Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. We are continuing our series number 2 on no distractions, and we're looking at neuromelanin, and we're looking at a particular way in which we can use our neuromelanin as it relates to critical analysis. And again, I look at what's happening to us as a people. I observe what's happening in the world and the United States, and I try to make sense so that we can speak to our children when they have questions about what they're looking at. And I'm looking at concepts that go far beyond our present day. And I know that critical analysis, the 3 gifts that we have as a human family that separate us from the animal world. We are part of the animal world. However, there are different degrees of the animal world, and the animal world has been given various gifts, specialties. Our ancestors in Kemet looked at these gifts, these specialties, and they were so inspired and impressed by the animal world's specialties that they began to develop a psychological conceptual framework. What's interesting is good friends of mine, family, I consider very good family, not blood, but family as we know, ancestral voices, were viewing a presentation I did as it relates to how our legacy has been stolen. Our legacy, the African, the original legacy of the world, that was given to the world through Kemet or Egypt. However, the Kemites were Cushites. This is a very important factor to understand. They were Cushites that had come from inner Africa. We call Kush. I call Kush. And I call Kush for a reason. Actually, within the writings, if you look at the script, it is spelled Kevs, Kevs, which becomes Kush. You see Qesh, Kesh. You can see it in many different ways, but what we're talking about are the people who are boundaried basically by the countries that we today call parts of Congo, northern Kenya, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and the southern part of Egypt. Coming up, probably the northernmost boundary would have been somewhere in the Aswan area, getting even closer to what we call today Luxor, or what was called Waset in the ancient world. And I say this because our legacy, as we look at the work of Dr. Richard King and brilliant Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, and I could go through the list of psychologists, but for time's sake, in their writings and in their research, they come from the perspective that psychology is not the study of the mind. PsychoSaku comes out of an African word that means soul. Soul of the mind, to be differentiated from the soul of the body in the sense of the Ba. And I mentioned in one of my presentations that I had a picture of Sigmund Freud's office where he had the various niches, statues of ancient Kemite. Not only that, but you know, when you lay on the couch and you're telling people your problems, and the idea of, you know, that talking cure, it was called, where you laid on a couch and you talked about, well, in Sigmund Freud's office, just above the couch where he had his clients lay, in fact, was a huge picture of the Sphinx. So Sigmund Freud was deep inside of African psychology, the study of the soul. He had studied, because he was exposed to the Kabbalah, which is the sacred mystical teachings of the Jewish faith, he was exposed to the Kemetic legacy coming out of the Canaanites. the ancient Natufians, who were the Canaanites, the Africans of this area, who had gotten their information from their brothers and sisters who were in Kemet right across when they walked across. But the Natufians themselves were also Cushites. And I raise all this because the study of the soul and the study of what we're experiencing as a people becomes very important as it relates to neuromelanin and understanding that African nerve track, the I-33 column of the spinal cord, the understanding of that blackness that goes within, deep inside of us, to help us understand and to critically analyze our experiences. That to me is so important. The idea of don't believe me. What I'm doing right now is not for you to believe me. I just want to make you think. Because we're in a very emotional world. We're in a very fragile world. We're in a world that, as we speak, the dominant culture is collapsing. They're collapsing mentally, spiritually, physically, and soulfully. They had their time. They had their time to prove that they were worthy of remaining in power, and they failed. They failed by creating isms, splitting people up, dividing them, conquering them, abusing them, taking advantage of them. Don't believe me. Just look at history. And so the work that I want to do today, what I want to talk to you about today, is taking relevant topics that we're dealing with today and showing how we can use our neuromelanin to critically analyze the situations that connect our neurons. A lot of talk. A couple weeks back, we did a piece on the work of our brother. Yes, he's our brother, Kanye West, and his comments as it related to number 45, as it related to the enslavement of African people. It's important to have these conversations. And we also delved into and spoke about other issues and topics and things that could be distractions, but since I say no distractions, this is not a distraction away from. This is using neuromelanin to be able to critically analyze and understand the positions that we find ourselves in today. And one of these issues that we find ourselves in today is this great discussion that we're having now about Pusha T and Drake. And I think it's very important that we look at it from a perspective. It's in our face. Our children are dealing with it. And so I think that as adults, we ought to be able to respond in our own way to this. And we need to ask ourselves, like, is this something new? Is this idea of two peoples of African descent going at each other? Is this new? Have we never done this before? And how did we deal with it back then? And how we dealt with it back then, it might be very interesting to apply how we deal with it today. Okay, not going to get too much into Pusha T and Drake as it relates to the ongoing saga of the story. What I want to deal with is our ability to fall into a trap to start to take sides. Who's right, who's wrong. Bordering on us enjoying it. Enjoying the conflict that is amongst us. I'd rather think that it's a teaching moment than a moment to enjoy one person put another person down, talk about their families. Family to me is sacred. Family has nothing to do. You have a problem with an adult, you deal with the adult. It had nothing to do with the children. It had nothing to do with the spouse. It has nothing to do with the girlfriend. Okay, that's what a psychopathic behavior does. You got a problem, you deal with it, adult to adult, but you don't bring family in. So that's one observation. The other observation is that this has been going on for African peoples since we were on the plantation. This is, in fact, And I know that we all want to believe that there was such a man by the name of Willie Lynch. But brothers and sisters, he never existed. That was just a made-up story. However, I often say that while he may never have existed, and while he may never have given that speech, how we conduct ourselves certainly is a syndrome that is within us, that we have divided ourselves. We have divided ourselves along complexion lines, color lines, pigmentation. We have separated ourselves according to texture of hair, and we've separated ourselves as it relates to male and female, and elder, younger. But this is a reflection of the society that we're living in. It just so happens, that when Europeans sneeze, black folk get pneumonia. It's much larger. The impact is much stronger amongst us because of the nature of where we've been in this society for so long. I've often said that black people don't have a problem. White people have a problem. Black people's problem is the fact that we are the receivers of European problems. So, we can go back to the plantation, where we separated ourselves on the plantation. When a woman of melanation or pigmentation was taken forcibly by the European male, and a baby was born. The baby comes forward, in a particular case, with a complexion more like the European male that abused the melanated woman than the melanated woman. And so there was a feeling towards that less pigmented child than the darkly pigmented, or the richer pigmented, or the more skin pigmented, however you want to say it, darker, lighter, whatever. Is that still with us today? Are we still dealing with this issue today? The issue of color? Is it that baby's responsibility for having been born looking like that they should be chastised, just as the child that was born pigmented is treated a certain way? Is it that child? Genes could have turned it around, that it could have been very different. And so we're still in the throes of this experience of the Willie Lynch syndrome. Let's come up a little bit more in time. And let's look at W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Let's look at some of the statements that W.E.B. Du Bois said about Marcus Garvey, and vice versa. Let's look at us as a people. Whether we are from the island of Puerto Rico or República Dominicana, Dominican Republic, or Haiti, or the joined island of Haiti or Jamaica, whether we are from Dominica or Barbuda, Aruba, whether we are from anywhere in South America, Central America, coming up to the United States of America, do we have an East Coast, West Coast battle going on? Do we have a Southern-Northern battle going on? So when we're looking at Pusha T and Drake, we have to ask ourselves, like, what exactly are we looking at? Is this new? Are we surprised? Dr. Clark would say, I'm surprised that you're surprised. Let's come up a little bit more. We can look at Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And you know what's interesting about this is that when W.E.B. Du Bois wanted to go on a very special African-American Economic Council, it was Booker T. Washington that wrote the letter of introduction for W.E.B. Du Bois. Yet look how that relationship turned out. Let's come up a little bit more and let's look at Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Was there a rap battle going on there? Was there a discussion about social issues between these two brothers? And did we take sides that we're with Martin Luther King? No, we're with Malcolm X. Could we not understand? Could we not see that both men were correct? And could not those both men see what was going on? Let's go inside the Nation of Islam. How about Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad? How about Malcolm and the other Muslim brothers and sisters? How about Malcolm and Muhammad Ali? See, we have to get up underneath this rug now. And we have to start talking about very important issues. We have to let it out now. We have to talk. And while I'm speaking about this on Facebook, what I'm saying is that we need to have these conversations amongst ourselves. We have to have real talk. Because if we're to heal, and if we are to administer to our children a way of critical thinking that allows them to come to a conclusion that's in their best interest, we have to deal with issues and deal with them effectively so that you don't have to tell people what is right and wrong. You just tell them the issue and walk through a process of critical thinking skills to help us understand, where do we go with this? Where are we going with this? Are we serious about what we're doing? After having been on this project with Malcolm X since last year, and like I said, Malcolm has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. People that I knew that knew him, we spoke about him hours on end. Teaching a course on Malcolm X's life for 12 years, the State University of New York at New Paltz, was one of the crowning jewels of my experience as an educator. And every year there were certain things that I did. I always showed the movie by Spike Lee. I always used the autobiography of Malcolm X. And the last year of my teaching was the year that Herb Boyd and Elias Shabazz, Malcolm's third daughter, published Malcolm's Diary of 1964. And that was the year that I used that book. I used Herb Boyd and Haki Matabuti and a number of other editors as it related to the Reinventing. I also read and used Manning Marabel's book on Malcolm X. I've tried to use every aspect of information from his speeches to video clips of him speaking. My personal friendship, if I may call it that, I'm not saying that we were real close. I'm not saying that I always was talking to her, but Dr. Betty Shabazz, who we invited to speak in one of our schools in the Bronx, and she graciously came up to speak to us about Malcolm. And after that, calling her at the office and visiting her at Medgar Evers College and having conversations with her allowed me to see Malcolm in another type of way. But in doing this documentary, since we finished Harriet Tubman's documentary, I'd already begun research on Malcolm in order to look at the documentary and to focus on the last year of Malcolm's life, which was almost like a caterpillar that goes into the cocoon, transforms into the butterfly, and is about to break out of the cocoon, or the chrysalis, as it's called. I was able to observe Malcolm from that perspective, specifically from basically November of 1963 until February 21st of 1965. I was able to look at the books that he used, his diary in particular, and Ghosts in Our Blood by Jan Carew, a Guyanese brother from South America that had worked with Malcolm since And what we don't know is that the Oxford debate took place on December 3rd, 1964. It was a Thursday. Malcolm arrived in London on Tuesday, the 3rd. And he would, my bad. He arrived in London that Tuesday before the 3rd. And he delivered the speech. But what a lot of us don't know is that on December 10th, on February 10th, 1965. Remember, he's going to be assassinated on the 21st. And you see, my advantage is in reading this. I know how this story is going to end. But what a lot of us don't know is that Malcolm was reinvited back to London to speak on Thursday, February 10th. At the London School of Economics. He had spoken at Oxford debate, which is a debate between Oxford and Cambridge, December 3rd, 1964. He's reinvited 2-3 months later to come back to London to speak at the London School of Economics. So what you're looking at is an internationalized individual. And one of the things that Jan Carew says in that book was that Malcolm realized that now that he was where he was in his life, he could have approached the relationship with Martin Luther King and the others from another type of perspective. I'm not saying he changed his views, because he didn't. Malcolm never changed. He transformed, but he never changed. But in hindsight, he saw different ways that he could have handled the situation, realizing who the real enemy was, really, as it relates to the emancipation and liberation of black people. So Jan Carew meets Malcolm this second time he's coming back. He don't know him during the Oxford debate, but he gets to know him personally at the opening of a magazine called The Magnet that was for Caribbean peoples in Europe, specifically English-speaking Caribbean people. He invites Malcolm to come to the opening night of the launching of this magazine called The Magnet, and he spends the next couple of days with Malcolm. Now, mind you, he's going to give this speech. Malcolm's going to return back to the United States. Now remember, we're talking about December 10th, Friday. He's coming back to his home being bombed that Sunday, the 14th of December. The following Sunday, of course, we know, February 21st, 1965, Malcolm is assassinated. When we're looking at us fighting each other, and again, I'm not going to give my opinion about what I feel. That's not my place. My place is just to make us think. As 6:30 Eastern Time, 3:30 Pacific Time, and all the times in between, and wherever in the world we're looking at this, I'm asking us as a people, do you think we can do better as it relates to how we interact with each other? Do you think that we can get serious about realizing about what's going to bring us forward? To begin to seriously consider looking at these arguments and these debates and these fights and these things from a different perspective. I'm not saying to change it. I'm saying, can we look at it from a different perspective? Can we, as a people, disagree without being disagreeable? Can we have unity but not have a unified thought. We don't all have to think alike. But can't we all just get along? Difference is healthy, I think. Difference makes me think. If I'm around someone who thinks differently than me, and then inquiring into the way they think allows me to kind of stretch my thinking process. I remember when Dr. Dilbert Blair and I were together in Atlanta back in the 90s. We were at a conference and I was sitting with him, and he spoke first and then I spoke after him. And I remember saying that, you know, the one thing that I always appreciated about Dr. Dilbert Blair and Bobby Hemmett and Phil Valentine and many other speakers is that my mind is like a rubber band. That when I hear them speak, like they really stretch my mind. And while at the end of their presentation, my mind might snap back, it's never where it was before they started talking. And that's why I appreciate thinking. And that's all I want you to do. That's all I want us to do, is to think. Develop a manner of connecting our neurons differently than the way they are connected now. And so when I decided I wanted to do this presentation, I just didn't want to lecture about neurons. I just didn't want to lecture about neuromelanin. I want to start to apply it so that we can start thinking, so that as I'm speaking about these topics, we then can connect our minds together, develop our neuromelanin to begin to think on a higher level. Because this civilization, as we know it today, this Oman Empire, child of the Roman Empire, Babylon, as Bob Marley would call it, it has problems. You can see it all around you. But even if it fell, are we prepared to do what's necessary? Are we prepared to have our own economic system? Are we prepared to have our own educational system? Do we control our entertainment system? Are we politically able to govern ourselves? What would happen if all of this fell apart? So I want to ask us, family, to think. I have nothing against any of the rappers or what they're saying or any of that. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to ask us to stop and think. Where are we headed with this? What are we doing? And always keep in mind, keep in the front of your mind, our children are watching. So when I hear people say what's wrong with the children, I encourage them to go to the mirror. Because we the adults, are the problem with the children. Because we ain't stepping up and telling them, being bold enough, loving enough, to be willing to let them know, you might not like what I say, but I'm not here for you to like me. I just want to guide you. There are experiences I have that you haven't had. I'm not going out like this. We have to speak up. And we have to be brave enough, as Malcolm and Martin Delaney, Fannie Lou Hamer, Harriet Tubman. We can go through the list. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents, those that we may never know their name, but they stood up for something. And because of that, we're here today. And for that, I appreciate them. I thank you for your support. I thank you for you sharing this time. We're heading towards the summer, the warm weather here. It is time for us now to connect and collect. It's time for us to realize that this ain't over till we win. You can go onto my site, www.kabakamene.com, and you can pre-order our next series, our document on Malcolm X. What would Malcolm do? It's called the X Factor. Chickens have come home. My son and I have put this together in order for us to analyze from his generation and mine. Because here's his notes. I mean, the brother writes notes. He's telling me what to say, okay? This is a result of what I've taught him. So these are his notes. And so what I'm asking us to do is to make this an event that we're bringing it out on Juneteenth. We avoided Malcolm X Day, Malcolm X birthday. We avoided February, the anniversary of his assassination. And we wanted to do it on a very interesting day when our brothers and sisters down south, in Texas in particular, long after they were so-called free, came to realize that they were free. And they called it Juneteenth Day. So it's a celebration of a freedom that came without them realizing it, but they were free all the time. And so we're offering this to you on Juneteenth Day for us. We've been free all the time. We just don't realize it. But we have been free. So I look forward to the future, family. This has been quite an experience for me, doing this project, this documentary on Malcolm X Shabazz on his last year. So with that, family, I thank you again for all of your support. Your financial support helps us move this agenda forward. The more you support us, the more we can support you. Go to my website. Look at the work that we have. Develop a relationship, because we've got to make this happen. We have a Comedic Wisdom School that has some of the greatest minds coming to you at shockmetaphysics.com. You can go to that website. You can enroll in our school, and you will have people coming to you from the counseling perspective. The brother Patah from Boston, who's doing the calendar project. You have Savvy Sasha, who's doing economy and what we as a people have got to do. And we're not talking about people who are investing money. There are people that will tell you to do that. I'm talking about even if you're on public assistance. What can you do with that money to begin to accrue some form of a financial backing that will benefit you and your family down the road? We have people from all walks of life who are our adepts, our teachers. So go to shockmetaphysics.com and enroll in our school. We decided that it had to be more than just Facebook. It had to be more than interviews. It had to be an organized structure of education. And now with this social media, it's phenomenal. So family, have a great day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. And ask yourself, what would Malcolm do? We know it's the X factor. We know that chickens have come home. So we thank you. Have a great day. It ain't over till we win. Hotep.